Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
I learned that from the Nancy Drew detective.
Okay, go.
You think you can follow the clues and solve the case of the missing condiment, Nancy Drew?
Because I've read every Nancy Drew mystery ever written.
Nancy, please tell me you're joking.
Wow, you suck at this Nancy Drew stuff. You should get a new hobby.
My name is Carson Drew, and this is my assistant, Nancy.
Nancy Drew.
It's curtains for you, Miss Drew.
Nancy Drew strikes again.
A regular Nancy Drew.
Well, hello, regular Drews.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome back to another episode. We are on episode 114, if you can believe it.
We have a very exciting one today. Very much
We do.
anticipated.
I know. Yes, lots of you have been waiting for this because this is a pretty early one that we've never covered. It is number 3, The Bungalow Mystery. I don't know that I've ever read this before, Kori.
I feel like I did when I was a child and just don't remember any of it. I know that I've had this copy since I was like 8, but I have no memory of the story.
None. Zero. Reading it, I was like reading it for the first time.
Yeah.
Which I don't know, probably some of you are jealous of. But I loved it.
It was fun. It was really good.
It was so good. And the mystery wasn't super sophisticated or anything, but it was
didn't need to be, honestly.
It didn't need to be, and it felt so classic and just like nostalgic. I felt like it was paced really well. They didn't try to do too much with it, which I really appreciated. Because I read the revised text, and a lot of times the revised text can be kind of like extra.
Yeah.
This was not that way. I felt like it must have been I didn't read the original text, but I felt like it must have been pretty faithful to the original text. Somewhat. Okay.
Yeah.
But then also like the prose was still really good. Like whatever editing they did, I'm thinking they kept a lot of Mildred Wirt Benson's writing in there because it was like so atmospheric, and like with the descriptions of the settings and the storms, like it was really good.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, I read the original first, and that's what I've been doing with this section, read the original first and then read the revised, because I did read both texts for this book. And I almost wonder what my opinion would be if I'd done revised first and then read the original, because I almost think the opposite, that it was way less atmospheric than the original.
That's interesting.
I still really liked it, to be clear. Both of them were very, very fun, but reading the original first, I'm like, oh, this is what the story is supposed to be. And then not to like hate on the revised at all. I don't mean to do that, because honestly, I'm really kind of surprised that I'm not loving the revised more than I am, because that is what we grew up on. You know, I didn't read the original text growing up ever. So this is really my first time reading these. And so I expected going into this to love the revised more just because of the nostalgia. But, and again, not to hate on it or anything, but I do read the revised and I'm like, oh, this is just way less than the original every single time. Way watered down. The writing, they took like a sentence of Mildred's and then reworded everything to make it sound less atmospheric.
So interesting.
They also added so much for the story. You said that the story is not very complicated. It felt like reading the revised, it's like, well, it wasn't broke, so why'd we fix it? You know? And the original story is so simple that it feels even more realistic, that there's not all these like bank robbers and all this other complicated stuff. Like the bad guy doesn't need to be this mastermind. Like stolen identities happen all the time, and that's just what it is. You know, not to spoil anything just yet, but like,
I didn't think they made them out to be masterminds. Did you?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No, but more so in the revised, certainly that they're like doing all of these crimes where it's just the one crime. And there's also, other than our Drew crew members, Nancy, Carson, Hannah, and Helen, there are 3 characters in the original text. Yeah. So all these other people, not there. Which is like, it felt like a lot reading it, even though compared to other revised stories, it's really not that much more. Yeah.
I mean, that must be the difference, right? Is that you're comparing the 2 books between each other, but I can only compare the book to all of the rest of the revised text mystery stories. And comparatively to all of the other revised texts, the Bungalow Mystery revised text is above and away, hands down, probably outside of Hidden Staircase, the best one I've ever read.
It's really good. Yeah.
So, yeah, and honestly, I mean, you could make a case against Hidden Staircase with this book, I feel like.
Oh, really?
I feel like the two, I mean, like, I think Hidden Staircase is more interesting mystery-wise, but writing-wise, I think the Bungalow Mystery might be better.
Okay, yeah.
And, like, reading it, like, I don't know, I think I may have enjoyed it more.
Really? I didn't expect to
Maybe.
enjoy it as much as I did. Bungalow Mystery doesn't, the title's not super inspiring.
Yeah.
Hidden Staircase, it's like, ooh, what is
Right,
that? I want to
yeah.
go down the Hidden Staircase.
Exactly.
Bungalow Mystery is like, it's just a house, you know?
Yeah. I think Hidden Staircase is probably more exciting and a little bit more of like a thriller kind of a feel than Bungalow Mystery. But Bungalow Mystery was just such vibes. Like, honestly, it's such a really great summer book. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
The vibes are so peak summer. So maybe it's just because also I'm in the right kind of time to have read it. It's like Nancy's going to like camp. They're like on a boat. It's like sometimes there are like these big storms, but overall I can imagine it's just hot. Like I bet everybody's sweating all of the time. And while no one wants to sweat, it just felt very atmospheric and very summery. I don't know. So it was just, it was just really fun to read. It was really nice to read.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Hidden Staircase. And obviously, because the first three were published at the same time, they're supposed to feel like a set, but it really did feel like a set with Old Clock, Hidden Staircase, Bungalow Mystery, not only because they refer to the first two a lot in this story, but also the original, it takes place on Moon Lake, not whatever, Twin Lakes. Yeah. So it really did feel like, you know, they're all supposed to be kind of the same summer that Nancy's been doing all these things. And we're going back and forth between River Heights and Moon Lake well, we didn't go in Hidden Staircase, but obviously Old Clock we did. So it feels like a little bit of a callback to that. And a nice little wrap up after the first two.
Well, and I don't know how to say this, but like they all feel the same.
Yeah.
Like the Bungalow Mystery to me feels like a combination of Hidden Staircase and Old Clock.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Just with like how Nancy kind of travels around and there's like just like friends kind of around and she's going to talk to like random people and she meets different people and she's investigating. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it because I feel like the other ones can kind of get really kind of crazy or like complicated in such a way where it's like you could never have guessed this or like the mysteries were just a little bit too random. But these all felt like, I don't know, just like good, solid mysteries that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain it. But yeah. So a couple things I did think are interesting that we should talk about off the bat. This book features Helen very strongly, very prominently. Helen is in it. Of course. And then also we get Nancy's first boyfriend, who I don't think we ever really talked about on the podcast, but Don.
Yeah, we don't ever mention him in any other book at all, I don't think.
No, I think he's in most of them until Ned comes into the picture. I think he's like mentioned. That's what I've read. I mean, I guess I don't know.
Oh.
Not Shadow Ranch, probably. But, like, I think he might be in...
No, because there was another boy in Shadow Ranch.
I think he might be in Lilac Inn.
Because she has a flirty thing with the doctor in Shadow Ranch in the original text of that one. But he's not in the original text at all.
Well, I do know.
The boyfriend.
This Dawn in particular, which I thought was just a fun fact. This Dawn, again, we don't see him again after Ned, at least. Maybe not ever. But he does show up in a file.
He does. Does he?
He does. Yes, I found this in number 27, Most Likely to Die, takes place at a high school reunion. And Dawn is there, and Nancy like remarks upon him like, "Oh yeah, we used to date in high school." And I think he still like has a thing for Nancy or something.
What?
Yes, but she just remembers him as just being like a nice guy or whatever.
I had no idea. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, sorry, Dawn. Oh my goodness.
Isn't that interesting?
Honestly, it felt so weird coming back to the first three books here because obviously we did our Drew Crew history episode very recently, but I almost forgot. I'm like, yeah, the only people that exist so far are Carson, Hannah, and Helen. Like everybody else, like McGinnis isn't here yet. Aunt Eloise isn't here yet. There's nobody else. We only have 3 Drew Crew members. We don't even have Togo yet. Like it just feels so weird going back to something so basic almost. Yeah. So honestly, Dawn was probably necessary at that point just to have another person.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I will say too, so this one came out with the original set. So that means that this one is going to be up for going into the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
So very soon. So
yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think is this the last one that would be?
It was the first 3 that were.
Yeah.
Well, see, I don't know about this because at first I thought it would be, because it's going to be 2026. My assumption was April 28th, 2026. But it's actually going to be January 1st, 2026.
Oh,
so does that
we
mean,
talked about this. Yeah.
Because the first 3 were published and then book number 4 came out in October 1930. So about 6 months later. So is it all 4 going to be January 1st, 2026? Because they are all now, because they were all from 1930. Yeah. So I don't know how it works.
Interesting.
Let's do the covers.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we have our 3 as per usual. Actually, I think maybe 4.
Oh, the Sabrina Gabrielli one was a little bit newer. I think she only did like the first 10 books or so. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a 1930 Tandy, a 1950 Gillies, and a 1965 Nappy. And then, I think this last one, who did you say their name was?
Sabrina Gabrielli, I believe is her name.
Sabrina Gabrielli. I think that was 2014.
That sounds right. Yeah.
From what I could find. And so our very first classic Tandy features Nancy in her blue suit. She's standing on like a little wooden crate looking into, I guess because that's the original text version, that's actually supposed to be the bungalow.
So there are 2 bungalows in the original text.
Okay. Okay.
This is the more rundown one.
Okay.
But it's the scene you're thinking of where she's looking in the window.
Okay, yeah. In the revised text, there's 1 bungalow and then 1 shack. They describe it as being like a shack. I'm guessing that's similar to what it was like in the original. No? Okay.
Kind of. Well, there's the bungalow at the very start of the revised text that they seek shelter in from the storm.
Is that totally separate? Like
that's not in the original at all. It's actually just like a random shack. They do find shelter, but they don't like drink hot chocolate there or anything.
Okay.
They just stay there until the rain stops and then they go back to camp. Because, by the way, they're staying at Moonlight Camp, not
Pinecrest Motel.
Not whatever motel. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Well, anyway, she's looking into something that's probably a bungalow. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's interesting. I don't love that cover actually because we can't really see Nancy's face.
That's my only complaint. Why is she looking away? She should be like looking behind over her shoulder or something.
Well, I wish we could at least see her face in like the reflection of the window if you really wanted to show her looking in. And then also, I don't know, there's something about, maybe it's just because the bungalow itself looks a little bit sad.
Well, it's supposed to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to, but it's just not really exciting to look at. You know what I mean? The 1950 Gillies, I have to say, I quite love.
I feel like this one is very famous. I feel like this one gets a lot of love.
Yeah. So it features, Nancy, she's watching. Is this from the original text or revised? It would have been the original, right?
This is from both. This scene is in both, where she's behind the couch watching him open the safe.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So she's sitting, like you said, behind the couch watching the bad guy open the safe and getting out all of the money to steal. And it's so like pop arty. Like she's wearing like this yellow shirt. She's got this shocked expression on her face. All of the colors just, it feels like like a painting from the 1950s, which I guess it is a painting from the 1950s.
It's very classic Gillies style, though.
Yeah, and it's almost like blocky. The couch is very interesting and how like it's kind of square it feels. There's nothing very soft about it all. It's all very sharp and crisp. And high contrast to the Tandy book where there's tons of like shadows and soft grass and plants and texture. This is it feels almost flat and sharp. Yeah. But I love it. I think it's very cool to look at. Very exciting.
It feels, I mean, this scene is very high stakes, so it feels
Right.
like you're there. Like, it's stressful, you know?
I do also love how these 1950s covers kind of wrap around onto the spine a lot of the times. I
Yeah.
love how like Nancy's foot is on the spine. You can just see that. I think that's just such interesting cover design. And then our 1965 nappy is a little bit more like our Tandy in the setting, is that we have Nancy looking out at the bungalow. I think this is a different scene actually, though. I think this might be the scene from the revised text where she and Dawn and Carson are trying to search around see if anybody is hanging out in the bungalow, basically seeing if our criminals are there.
I assume that,
think?
well, I think that's, both of these scenes are in both, but I think that this is where she follows Aborn to the clearing. And then she's like, where did he go? And then she notices his footprints are going to the older bungalow. Yeah.
You're totally right.
Because she's trying to hide, because she doesn't know if he sees her yet, you know?
Right.
I assume that's what this is, but there's a lot of scenes where she's like outside waiting to see if anybody's coming out or seeing if she can see what's in there. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I guess it could be either, but yeah, it says, so it's Nancy with her red hair, in a green dress, kind of hiding a little bit behind a tree, looking out at this bungalow / shack, who knows, and some footprints that are leading up to it. Again, this feels kind of uncompelling to me.
It does, yeah. It doesn't make me want to read it again. It's just like an old house. I'm like, oh, it's just going to be a story about a gross old house covered in cobwebs, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't draw you in like other covers do as well.
Well, and I wish she had done more of his Visionet style.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'd be interested to see what he would choose to do for that, you know, for this particular mystery. But yeah, I don't know. I much prefer the Gillies to that. So, and then the 2014 one is, I love the art style of this. It has Nancy, you can't really tell any details about her face or anything, but you know that it's her because she's wearing her cloche hat with like, it's full red, and she's got a scarf kind of flying in the wind that like wraps up around the title of the Bungalow Mystery, which is very cool. And she's in her blue roadster driving down what I assume is the road to the bungalow, because it looks kind of janky.
Yeah, secluded and
yeah. And then I think there's like a cliff on the side too, which I think is also relevant. But yeah, I really love the art style. I think it's very beautiful, but I think it's kind of a vague cover.
Right. There's no bungalow even to mention here. So,
and it could be any Nancy Drew mystery where she's driving in her roadster down a road, and it's
exactly.
like that. That's
is all of them?
Yes.
Yeah. I agree though. The style's beautiful. And if you've seen the other covers that the same artist did, they all are the same style. So a little bit more vague, and you never really see details of Nancy's face, I don't think. But yeah, they're kind of a little bit more whimsical. Almost to the level of like the Diaries covers are a little bit more dreamy looking. I don't know, but the colors are always very saturated and beautiful. But
it's very beautiful and very evocative. Like I love it, but it just doesn't point to anything specific. Really.
Exactly. Yeah,
I do love the like cover design as a whole, with what they did with like the Nancy Drew mystery stories, and then putting the title in the beautiful script next to it. I think that's very cool and very different than we get with obviously like the flashlight versions or anything else where it's pretty poppy, the title, you know. This one's a little bit more subtle. So yeah, very interesting. Lots of variability with these. I feel like in a lot of our covers, a lot of time they're pretty similar. All of these are very different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
I have the nappy one, of course, and you have the nappy one, it looks like.
Well, I also have the Gillies one.
Oh, you do? Is that the revised?
I didn't realize it until like just now, like just before we recorded. But no, it's not. It's
the original.
No, it is the revised. It's the revised.
Oh, okay,
text.
okay,
Yeah, sorry.
Gotcha. I have what would have been the Tandy, but I don't have the dust jacket anymore. And I just have to share, this is actually the oldest book in my collection.
Wow.
Because if you open it on the inside, you can't really see it here.
Oh.
But there is an inscription.
Stop.
And it looks like maybe this was given to someone for a birthday gift and then later sold. And then the second owner actually erased the inscription, but you can still see a tiny little bit. I can't even see the first name anymore. I can kind of see the last name. And then from aunt and uncle something as a gift on her 10th birthday, January 31st, 1939. So, yeah.
That's
adorable.
So cool. Oh, so sweet. Yeah, what a lovely story. Like, that's such a story of Nancy Drew.
Mm-hmm. Just
like
being passed down in that way.
Passed down and like a gift to a young girl on her 10th birthday, like from 1939 to 2025. Here we are. Oh, it makes me want to cry. That's so sweet. Oh my God.
I was trying to be so delicate with it while I was reading. Like, don't bend a single page. Keep it in good condition, because it really is. It's still in really nice condition other than the dust jacket being gone, and just having that inscription in there is so special. I don't know. I love it so much. It just makes it so much better.
Wow.
I don't know. Just this wonderful tradition of thinking about this young girl that would have been, now that I think about it, if she was born, if her 10th birthday was 39, she was the exact same age as my great grandmother. And so just thinking about how that woman's life, how it could have gone growing up with Nancy and then giving this to someone else. And then that person gave it to someone else. And then it ended up here with me. It's just so special. I love it.
That is so special.
Yeah.
And what a story for like our last little mystery story episode here, the Bungalow Mystery, which is like the oldest book that we hadn't read yet. Like, that's so special. Yeah. So special. You guys, Nancy Drew is so cool. God, why am I so emotional?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Jeez. Well, I just bought The Professor and the Puzzle, and I was flipping through it when I just got it. And inside are some sticky notes from a girl who was probably clearly doing like a book report or something. And I'm reading them, and she says, and the puzzle in that book, Nancy and her friends go to a Greek gala where you have to dress up as a Greek god or goddess, and Nancy dresses up as, and then as Athena, the goddess of wisdom. So I dressed up as Nancy when she was at the gala. Oh yes, so there's one of my favorite Nancy Drew books is The Professor and the Puzzle. Aww. So she must have been doing like a little book report where she dressed up. You remember how like we used to do that?
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember dressing as Athena for a class project in 8th grade. Yeah.
That's so fucking sweet. Like I just,
yeah.
I can't. I can't handle
it. Makes it so much more special. It really does.
It really does.
Okay. So I think we should do revised text summary first, and then maybe at the end I'll give like a very brief what's different about the original text.
Yeah.
And then I think we should also save a little bit of time to talk about the game, because technically Secret of the Old Clock is partially based on this story.
Yeah.
So I think we should talk about it a little bit at the end. So
3 words though?
Yes. I see you have summer. And I can't think of anything more perfect. Mm-hmm. Except maybe like lake or something, but like summer boating, lakes.
Yeah.
It's all
Or camp even, or just like
camp,
woods. I don't know, Yeah. So summer.
Yeah.
I had a hard time coming up with 3 words for this because I felt like, even though like I loved it and I really enjoyed it, it didn't feel like there was anything particularly iconic about it. Yeah. Like it all kind of blended in and honestly could have been any Nancy Drew book. Like any of these individual pieces could have been a Nancy Drew book. And I mean, like we could talk about the crime, I guess, but like, I don't know, theft, embezzlement's kind of boring.
Mom's jewels. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. We could say, mom's jewelry.
Mm-hmm. Jewelry's a big one.
Yeah. And then I did kind of feel like instant besties was pretty good because I feel like Nancy was just instantly best friends with everybody she met in this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Instant besties.
Okay.
Summer and jewelry.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
That's a Nancy Drew mystery story right there.
It really is.
Throw in the missing orphan or the long lost orphan, I guess.
Yeah.
And there we go.
Yeah. Okay.
New rule.
What?
If you cannot swim and you don't want to wear your life jacket, you do not get to go on the boat.
Even if you can swim, you should still wear a life jacket on a boat.
Or at least bring it with you.
Yeah.
In the original, Helen cannot swim, and this made me so mad. Helen refused to bring her life jacket, and this girl cannot swim.
Oh, Helen.
Your aunt owns a summer camp, and you've been coming here the entire summer, every summer of your life, and you're telling me you can't swim.
That's
Girl,
crazy.
you're not allowed to get in the boat. We love Helen.
We love Helen. She's not super helpful.
Yeah. It's a reason she got phased out and Bess and George came in instead. Sorry, Helen,
true.
but yeah.
George can run, man.
Yeah.
That girl can run.
Mm-hmm.
Helen is drowning in the lake.
Helen is
We have to
almost
save
drowning
her.
Nancy in the lake. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, shall we start?
Let's do it.
So we start our mystery in the revised text. We're starting with the revised text. Helen, they're in a motorboat on Twin Lakes, but in the original text it's Moon Lake, as we discussed.
Why would we change this? Moon Lake is so iconic.
Well, Twin Lakes shows up again, too.
It does. Maybe it's so that we couldn't put Helen back at summer camp with her aunt because aunt comes in anyway. Maybe that's probably what it is.
Maybe. Anyway. But so they're on the lake, they're boating, not doing anything in particular except taking a boat out, and it starts to storm. Nancy is like trying to get them back to shore through the storm, but the visibility is so poor that she ends up crashing the boat into a log, which causes her and Helen to fly out of the boat, and the boat starts to sink, whatever. They can't get back in the boat. And Helen can't feel her arms. And so she can't swim. And so Nancy has to try to swim to shore through the storm and massive giant waves while dragging Helen at the same time. She's also shouting for help because she doesn't think that she's going to be able to make it. And I think even at one point, Helen is like, just go without me, Nancy, save yourself.
Yeah.
And Nancy's like, absolutely not, of course. It's you would not leave your friend.
Of course not.
And so she's shouting for help, and thankfully this attracts the attention of this 16-year-old girl who is on shore. She has a rowboat. She starts rowing out to them, and she rescues them both. We learn that her name is Laura Pendleton, and she gets them both back to shore. It is still storming, though, and they're wet and freezing, I guess, because you would think it's summer. It can't be that cold, but I guess if you're wet, who knows? And it's it could have been a cold front, who knows? And so they decide to take shelter in a nearby bungalow that Laura has seen. It's locked and no one seems to be home, so the girls go in through an open window, and inside they find some hot cocoa and blankets, and they get warm and use them, even though clearly this belongs to someone else, but Nancy does leave a note for the owner, thanking them. While waiting out the storm, Nancy and Helen explain to Laura that they are in town for the week at the Pinecrest Motel and Resort. They are waiting for Helen's Aunt June to join them because she is going to help design Helen's wedding dress, because as soon as Jim Archer returns from Europe from his oil business, they're going to get married.
Yay.
Here we go.
That got added, of course, because you remember Helen's marriage plotline is only in the revisions. So.
Mm-hmm. We learn that Laura is also staying in a nearby hotel, but we learn that she has been orphaned. Here we go. We were just talking about tropes. This is another one of the tropes. She is waiting for her new guardians to show up. They were family friends of her mother, and they have just been contacted, and they asked Laura to come here to meet them. Their names are Mr. and Mrs. Aborn, but Laura's kind of worried about this because the letter that she got from them, wasn't super cordial or warm, and so she's a little bit worried that they don't want to be her guardians.
Poor Laura,
sad.
honestly.
Really sad.
Yeah.
Sad and scary to
of course,
imagine your mom's died and you're just alone, and then these new people don't want you.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be such a heart-sinking feeling.
Yeah.
But so after the storm passes, they all head back to their hotels, and Nancy and Helen tell the manager that they sunk his boat. He's fine about it, though. And on their way out of the manager's office, they run into this really disagreeable woman who has a flat tire because of the storm or something, and she's demanding that someone help her, but she's also really wet and bedraggled from, I guess, walking from wherever her car is in the storm, and they kind of make fun of her for not being put together or something, or not having cleaned up, and but she's really mad that this manager won't help her change this flat. And so Nancy and Helen are you could call a service station or someone and they'll send someone out. And she's like, oh, fine.
What's the alternative? Like, yeah, of course you've got to do that. Why are you scoffing?
Well, it's also kind of weird that they're not at a hotel where like there would be like a concierge or someone who's like, yeah, let me help you find someone to come out and do that.
Sure.
I understand too that the manager's busy, but like, why would you go to the manager? I don't know. Anyway, so the next day, Nancy and Helen go to Laura's room over at her hotel, and she is very upset. It turns out that Mrs. Aborn is like awful, and she hates her, and she blames Laura for like having to come so far to like get her or something, even though Laura was like, I didn't choose this place. And of course, we learn that it turns out that the woman that we ran into the other night was Mrs. Aborn. So awkward. The whole thing is like kind of strange though, because Mrs. Aborn also called Laura's mother Mary when Laura was like, my mom's name was Marie. So they're supposed to have been friends. So like, how would she get her name wrong?
Right.
Sus. Anyway, so the girls have lunch together and they play some tennis, and then they drive Laura back to her hotel, and she invites them to come back later to meet the Aborns as well, which of course Nancy is really keen to do because she's interested in everybody's business, you know. And on their way back to the Pinecrest Motel, Nancy stops by a real estate agent to see who owns the bungalow, I think because she wants to like try to get thanks to them more than she already has by writing a note. I don't know. And she learns that it's been rented by a Mrs. Frank Marshall. So Nancy and Helen drive back out there to see if like she's maybe home at this point. But when they do, they notice there's like a dark car that's coming out of the driveway. And then like as it turns out of the driveway, it almost like sideswipes them as they're coming out. So they're like, that's weird. And they just leave. Mm-hmm. They go back to the hotel, and Helen's Aunt June has finally arrived. She also brings a message for Nancy that Hannah has sprained her ankle.
Hannah.
I know. Carson is like out on a business trip, and so Hannah is like home alone and injured. And so Nancy decides to cut her trip short after they go see the Aborns to go home and take care of Hannah. So they go to visit the Aborns, and they seem to be, I don't know, kind of not horrible. Like they're pleasant at least to Nancy and Helen. So maybe it was just like the bad weather and the car trouble that made Mrs. Aborn be mean that day, you know? And they talk to them a little bit, and the Aborns tell Nancy and Helen when Laura like goes to get some of her mother's jewelry from like the hotel safe. They tell them that Laura's fortune, which is being held in a trust for her until she's 21, has been thoroughly depleted. And Mr. Aborn is supposed to be the one who's managing it like for the next 5 years until Laura comes of age, but probably they're going to have to provide for the bulk of Laura's upbringing. But this is really weird, because this is definitely not the impression that they got from Laura. They basically understood from Laura that she has a pretty sizable trust fund. So is she lying? Mm-hmm. Is he lying? Where did the money go? Did the money go somewhere? It's very weird.
So they go down to the parking lot and they actually don't see the car. So it's a little strange, but whatever. Now, Nancy's going to take Helen back to the Pinecrest Motel. She drops her off and then she heads home to River Heights to visit Hannah. On the way, though, we get caught in another massive storm. And this one is even worse in the original text because the roads are basically just like dirt roads, right? And so it's actually really dangerous for her to be going on this road that she's on. And then we get to a detour, which happens to put us on like an even worse road. And that happens to be the exact same road where the Aborn's house is. So we're going like right past, is it Melrose Lake, right?
I don't know. I was very kind of confused as to where everything was because they're not super clear whenever Nancy travels up there where she's going, in the revised text at least. But yeah, could be.
Because Melrose Lake is the same in both books. It's just the first lake that we start at is different.
We're not super clear that the house that the Aborns are on is on a lake. Like I think we might say it like one time or whatever, but we don't ever talk about the lake whenever we're up there except for whenever we stay at the hotel.
Oh, true. Okay, so this is much more clear in the original text. So we're at Moon Lake, which is about 40 minutes from River Heights,
Okay.
we say. And then Melrose Lake is about halfway between both points. So it's only about 20 minutes from, or 20 miles from River Heights. But we're now about 20 miles from Moon Lake / Twin Lakes at this point as well.
In the revised text, they make it seem like it's much farther. Like it's like 2 hours or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, well, 40 miles for us today is about 40 minutes for us, but it could easily be 2 hours for somebody who's only going 35 miles an hour.
And if there's less roads,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we get into a storm like this, it slows us down quite a bit.
Right. True.
So, and actually, I think in the original, she says something about wanting to take the scenic route home so that she could look at the water a little bit longer on her drive. So she ends up taking the road that leads us past Melrose Lake. So the first bungalow that we just took shelter in from the storm is here on Twin Lakes or whatever. The other 2 bungalows are going to be at Melrose Lake.
In the original text.
In the revised text. In both. They're both at the other lake at Melrose.
There's only one bungalow in the revised text.
Yes, but they're both bungalows in the original text.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're both. So what's the shack in the original is also a bungalow. It's just an older bungalow. But they are very close together. They're like walking distance apart, which obviously we'll get to. So as we're driving, we get caught in this massive storm, pretty much as bad as the first one that we were in on the lake. And a massive pine tree ends up falling down in the road right in front of Nancy's car. She's actually only able to stop just like inches from it whenever it falls. And now, of course, this has blocked the roadway. She cannot get home unless she's able to move this tree. And she gets out and she tries to move it herself. It's way, way, way too heavy. But then, luckily, we have another car drive up, and they get out and they introduce themselves as neighbors of the Aborn family. And so they're very excited to meet Nancy because she explains that she knows Laura, and they're like aware that Laura is supposed to come to stay with the Aborns, but they were under the impression that the Aborns were currently out of town. So they're like really kind of surprised to learn that like Laura's going to be there already or whatever. But they help her move the tree, and she promises to like stay in touch with them or whatever. And then she does end up going home. Hannah's okay. She got like a neighbor to come help look after her or whatever. And so Nancy takes over playing nurse for Hannah this evening. But Hannah tells us that actually Carson needs her to call this evening because he needs her help with an embezzlement case.
Ooh.
So very exciting. So Nancy helps Hannah up to bed and make sure she's okay. And she does give Carson a call, except he's not at his hotel. No answer when she calls. And so obviously he seems to have checked out early, probably. Nancy's concerned, though, because this is not like Carson. Obviously, he always tells her whenever he's going to be leaving someplace or changing his plans. And Nancy asks, and the hotel says that they have no idea where Carson is currently. And so whatever, she just has to go to bed and hope that maybe he'll call tomorrow. But in the middle of the night, we are awoken by a loud thump. And at first she's like, oh, Hannah might have fallen out of bed or something. So she goes to check on her, but Hannah's still asleep. And then she's like, oh, wait, hold on. That noise is coming from downstairs. I better go check because somebody's probably breaking in at this moment. And she goes to call the police, but it's just Carson. He forgot his keys, decided to come home tonight and had to break in through the window because there was like an unlocked window in his office or something. So it's fine. It's just Carson. So they go to bed, and then the next morning they wake up and Carson starts telling Nancy more about his embezzlement case. It turns out someone has been stealing bearer bonds from the Monroe National Bank, and the bonds belong to people who had asked the bank to invest their money. And the bank is still going to make sure that everyone gets their money or whatever, but obviously they need to catch the person who's doing this, and they're trying to keep it quiet so that investors don't get panicked or whatever.
Yeah.
Carson thinks that this is probably a multiple person job and that one of these investors could be involved somehow, or that it's an inside job. And so he's looking into bank employees, and he's going to be out of town for a lot of the rest of the book because he's going to be traveling to other states to talk to these investors. But there's also some investors that do live here in River Heights. So he's asking Nancy to check into the people that are in River Heights. She's very excited about this. She agrees. And then the phone rings and Nancy answers it. And there's a woman asking for Nancy. But as soon as Nancy's like, yes, hello, that's me, there's a scuffle on the other end of the line and just like a crash. And then the line goes dead. Nancy's like confident that, okay, yeah, somebody was calling for my help, but they're in trouble and have had the phone taken away from them or something. But we have no way of knowing who it is. You know, Star 69 did not exist back then, so we can't just like call back and find out who this could have been.
Although Star 69 didn't exist, but didn't operators exist?
Yeah.
So couldn't she have just been like, hello, operator, who just placed the call to my house? I think they're in trouble.
I don't know. Did they explain why they couldn't do that?
Nancy hangs up and waits for a second call, but no one calls. You didn't recognize the voice, Carson asks. No, so I can't call back. Carson leaves. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe later. Nah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, so she's got no way to help, and so instead we're just going to work on Carson's little assignment for us instead. She decides that she's going to go around to these different people's homes and ask them if they are willing to volunteer at this local youth center. And she decides that this is the perfect judge of character because any good person would naturally want to help the youth center and any evil person would naturally say no. So this will be the ultimate indicator of their goodness, right?
This is crazy.
Also, it's not clear if Nancy like volunteers at this youth center as well, or she just thinks that it's a noble cause. But we talk about the youth center a lot in this story for like no reason. And that's her cover story, is she's trying to raise money for this youth center. But anyway, so first we go to this old woman's home, the first person on the list, and Nancy decides that because this woman is willing to give a check donation for the youth center, then she must be innocent. So Nancy mentally crosses her off the list as like it's impossible that she could have been the bad guy, right? And so next we're going to go to the next person on the list, but as she's walking down the road, a car stops her, and it is our old boyfriend, Don. We learned that he was Nancy's prom date at River Heights High School. So I guess Nancy is a high school graduate? Question mark? Yeah. I would assume so. If he made it to prom, he probably made it to the end of the year, hopefully. But anyway, I guess he's in college, but he's currently in town because his sister is getting married this weekend. And also the like rehearsal dinner is this barbecue that is going to be thrown by, guess who? The next person on Nancy's list. And so he's like, hey, do you want to come with me as like my date to the barbecue? And she's like, oh, that's so perfect, because then I can like have like an excuse to suss out the host and see if he seems suspicious or not. And so she like excitedly accepts, obviously. And so she decides not to head to his house now because we'll be there tomorrow anyway, right? And so we'll just skip to the third person on our list. So she gets Dawn to drive her home, and then Hannah says, oh, look, you just got a postcard from Helen. And Helen says that she and her aunt are leaving the motel that they'd been at and just letting Nancy know that they're not there anymore. They're going to take a trip out of town somewhere. And then on their way back home, they're planning to visit Laura before they come back to River Heights. And she's like, I'll talk to you when we get back to River Heights or whatever.
But so this postcard, this makes Nancy realize that the voice that she heard on the phone this morning was actually Laura's. That's why it sounded familiar. It was Laura's voice. And so now she's incredibly worried that something has happened to Laura. And so she tries to call the Aborns number, but the operator tells her that the phone has been disconnected. Suspicious. So she calls those two siblings who she met on the road who helped her with the tree, and they tell her that their dad had actually visited the Aborns the other day and saw a note on the porch that said to like discontinue the milk delivery. And so it seems like that the house is closed, right? That they're not there, they're not home, and there's no sign of Laura or the Aborns. So like, maybe Nancy was just mistaken. Maybe they weren't going there. We don't know. So Nancy goes to Carson's office to talk to him about this, and he actually has to go out of town for a couple days like he said he would, but he's going to be back on Sunday. And that on Sunday, the plan is that he and Nancy will drive up to the Aborns' house to kind of investigate, see what they can find out. So they plan on doing that. But Nancy is downtown now, though, and she knows that someone else on Carson's list lives nearby, Mrs. John Stewart. So she decides to go over to her apartment building. Kori, I will say, this apartment building they describe in the book as being 20 stories high.
I was so surprised.
I knew it, Kori. I knew it. Do you remember when you were talking about the Hardy Boys? And I was like, River Heights seems more metropolitan to me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was this memory.
Exactly.
Seated in the back of my brain or something. A 20 stories high apartment building in downtown River Heights. This place has got to be more urban. For sure.
Of course.
Than we think.
Any skyscraper like this, it's got to be. It's not the only skyscraper around with everything being one story around it. That's not.
I just thought that was super interesting. A very interesting fact about downtown River Heights. It's like a metro. Yeah.
Well, she describes it as being like a very modern new apartment too, right? So it seems like there's active construction going on in this area. Yeah. Very interesting.
So Nancy goes to visit this lady in her apartment building. Unfortunately, though, this is so funny. When she knocks, she gets being mistaken, like by the maid answers the door and mistakes her for being the dog walker. She just like hands her like these 2 poodles that she thinks Nancy's gonna walk for her. And so like Nancy also thinks this is funny. Nancy like laughs and says hello to the poodles and knocks again. And this time Mrs. Stewart comes to the door and she explains like, yeah, so I'm not the dog walker. your dogs. Also their names, the poodles' names. I just love this. I thought this was so precious. Their names are Irene and Frederica.
So cute.
This is so sweet. But anyway, Mrs. Stewart is like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Please come in. And Nancy asks her about volunteering for the youth center, which is her cover or whatever. And Mrs. Stewart like says, oh, like I don't have time to talk about this. Can you come back later? I'm expecting a violinist to come like play for her at her apartment. And I don't know why, but for some reason this makes Nancy think that like Mrs. Stewart couldn't be responsible for the thefts. Honestly, I think she thinks this because she thinks Mrs. Stewart is too dumb.
That's what I got from it as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So she just like
is not intelligent enough. Yeah. Because she's like acting kind of vapid, I guess.
She's just underestimating her.
Also, what about her husband? They have this whole conversation about her husband like being away or like at a meeting or so. I don't remember exactly what it was, but
he's filming the Daily Show. He's busy, okay?
God.
Sorry, Jon Stewart has not hosted the Daily Show in like 15 years at this point.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
So funny. Yeah, Nancy crossed this lady off her list because she does, and it's not this lady, so it doesn't matter. Whatever. So now Nancy decides she's going to go visit the next person on her list, who is Mr. Stephen Dowd. And she goes to his house. He lives at like this, what do you call it? Like a duplex situation. And he and his wife are not home, but she talks to their next door neighbor, who is also their landlady. And she says that the Dowds are actors and typically like gone and out of the house a lot. Okay. But so now Nancy has nothing else to do, so she goes home. Then when she gets home, she walks into her living room to find no one but Laura standing right there. So Laura tells Nancy that she has run away from the Aborns, and she explains that as soon as she left the resort with them, the Aborns started like asking her all these questions about her mother's jewelry, which Laura had been passed down from her mother. And then when they get to the Aborns' house, they like locked Laura in her bedroom, and obviously she starts like panicking, and she listens to their conversation downstairs, and she overhears that they are like trying to get a hold of her jewels. Like they want her to give the jewels over to them. And they're also like really mean to her, and they like pester her about this. They're like, give us the jewels. And obviously Laura doesn't want to give them the jewels anymore. So she tries to call Nancy for help. And then Mrs. Aborn like catches her and like yanks the phone away. So that's the phone call that Nancy got this morning or the other morning. I don't remember. And so, so she, as soon as she had a chance, she like took her jewels, climbed out of a window and came here. But so we can't really call the police. I don't know why, but I guess because they think it's going to be like Laura's word against the Aborns, and they don't really like have any evidence of anything going on. So like the police could potentially force Laura to go back with the Aborns. And so they decide that best idea right now is just for Laura to just stay here, and then as soon as Carson gets home, surely he'll have some idea of what to do about this situation. So Nancy talks to Carson on the phone actually that night, and he tells her that he's found evidence that a Mr. Hamilton might be behind the embezzlement, and that Nancy can just forget about looking into Herbert Brown, because it turns out that that guy's a friend of the bank's president. And so I guess that clears him for some reason.
Obviously.
I'm like, that's the perfect opportunity.
He probably has kind eyes, so therefore.
That's probably it. Yeah, jeez. And so, of course, she also tells Carson about Laura's situation and how Nancy actually wants to go up to the Aborns' house to investigate before Carson even comes back. And he's like, okay, Nancy, but be careful, please. And so now she doesn't have to investigate Herbert Brown. She actually arranges for Dawn to take Laura to the barbecue to, like, give Laura something to do and, like, get her out of the way for a little while Nancy herself goes up to the Aborns' home to investigate. And so she does this. She drives up to, I guess it's not the Twin Lakes area. It's
Melrose Lake.
Melrose Lake area. And she parks on the side of the road that leads to the Aborns' house. And as she's walking, she actually sees Mr. Aborn with a package walking through the woods. And Laura had actually mentioned something about Mr. Aborn carrying, like, a weird package. Sorry. I'm a child.
It took me a second. I was like, what? Oh.
And so Nancy decides she's going to follow him to see where he's going.
So we do follow him to this abandoned shack in the woods, which this is the one on our cover here, of both the Tandy cover and the Nappy cover. Yeah. And this in the original text is our first bungalow, but it is just a shack in the woods in the revised text. But either way, it is like a really abandoned, rundown building that is like really far into the woods. There's not like a road that you can just drive up to it. We do have to walk to it and find it. But when we get to this bungalow, no one comes out. She's actually kind of worried that, like, Mr. Aborn is maybe watching her from behind another tree or something and waiting to attack her, but she doesn't see anybody. So she decides she's going to go up and investigate the shack/bungalow a little bit more. It's locked. I don't know why we try the door first, but it's locked. So when she can't get in through the door, she decides to go around to the side window where there's like a board that's like falling off a little bit so she can kind of peek inside. And while she's peeking inside, who comes up behind her but Mr. Aborn? And he's like, what are you doing here? And she gives vague answers and doesn't really answer the question. He doesn't really press for more answers because he's so concerned about finding Laura. He claims that that's what he's doing out here, is looking for her. Whatever. He kind of implies that Laura's like crazy and would definitely do something like this, like run away to this shack in the woods to hide from him and his wife. And he even tells us that he's hired a PI to track her down. And that makes Nancy nervous because she's like, oh gosh, this PI is probably like already at my house by now trying to get to Laura. And so she excuses herself and gets back to her car. We're not done investigating, though. Of course we're not. And so Nancy decides that she needs to come back here under the cover of nightfall. But obviously it's like the middle of the day right now. So we are actually going to go back to that little town by the lake, engage a hotel room there, and we're just going to kind of hang out in our hotel until this evening, which is exactly what we do. She swims a little bit in the afternoon, and then she goes to dinner. And then after it gets dark enough, she sneaks back to the Aborn home to snoop. She actually does want to snoop the actual Aborn home as well as this old shack, as well as the old shack this evening, but she decides she's going to start at the Aborn home. So because Laura told us about sneaking out of the bedroom window, she realizes that that's what she can use to sneak in because the window's still open, right? And as she's sneaking in, she hears a car come up the drive. Darn it, it's the Aborns, and they come in and they start coming up the stairs, and Nancy's almost caught, but she manages to hide in the closet really quickly. And then the Aborns come in and start basically tearing the room apart looking for Laura's jewels. He almost catches Nancy in the closet, and it's actually even closer in the revised text because he starts taking all of the clothes out of the closet too, and she's like hiding behind the dresses, and he's like, oh, fine, I'll just leave the dresses for tomorrow or whatever, because he's like looking through the pockets of all the dresses as well to look for the jewels. And so she manages to hide behind the ones he doesn't check, but then he goes downstairs, or I guess both the Aborns go downstairs. But he takes some of Laura's suitcases out of her closet and takes those downstairs with him. After a minute, Nancy is able to like sneak out of the room and kind of follow him downstairs and overhear him and Mrs. Aborn talking. They're talking about how they're just going to pack everything up and leave. And then Nancy sees Mr. Aborn go into the living room, open the safe that's filled with money. There's the safe like in the wall in the living room. And this is the picture that's on the Gillies cover where she is hiding behind the couch and watching him take everything out of the safe. Which, by the way, the safe is filled with not only a bunch of cash, but also a big old stack of savings bonds. So Nancy knows like, oh, this, okay, obviously is where Laura's fortune has disappeared to. And the Aborns are trying to steal it now. So they go back upstairs with all of the money in the suitcases they'd gotten out of Laura's closet. And then Nancy decides that this is time to sneak out of the house so that she can get away and call the police. So she does. She sneaks back out the front door while they're upstairs and heads for her car. But then she's like, that shack in the woods, there was just something about it. Maybe before I called the police, I can like figure out what's going on in the woods. Like what packages was he taking there? Maybe it's more of Laura's money. I don't know. So she is able to get over to the shack pretty quickly, but her flashlight starts running out of batteries. And so she breaks into the shack, but the flashlight is getting like dimmer and dimmer. And she tries to look around the shack a little bit, but there's like nothing in here. It's like completely empty except for like a rug on the floor or whatever. But she does find that there's a trap door just like in the middle of the living room. So she goes down the trap door, and what do we see? Jacob Aborn in the basement, just lying on a cot.
At first she's like kind of freaked out about this, she like runs away. But then she like, I guess, bravely decides to go back, and she realizes that man, she actually finds a lantern too, and she's able to light. She goes back down and she sees more clearly that man isn't the man that she knows as Jacob Aborn, but he looks a lot like him. And he's also unconscious and moaning and chained to like a cot down there. So horrible. Nancy's able to revive him, and she actually learns that no, he is Jacob Aborn, and that the man who Nancy met as Jacob Aborn is actually Stephen Stumpy Dowd. Woohoo! Also, like, chalk this one up to another great villain name.
Yeah.
Stumpy Dowd.
In the original, he's not Stephen with Stumpy as the nickname. He is just Stumpy Dowd. Yeah.
Totally Stumpy.
Even better.
Here's the thing. Do these villains pick their own names? Because one would think that a nickname, like you would have to kind of consent to it for it to become the name that you're known as. So he's just okay with being called Stumpy?
Everyone called me Stumpy.
Jeez. Okay. But if this name sounds familiar to you, it is because, yes, Stephen Stumpy Dowd is the same Stephen Dowd who is on Nancy's list from Carson, who he is looking into for this embezzlement case. So we learn from Mr. Aborn, that real Mr. Aborn, that he and his wife came to the Aborns as hired help. And then after Mrs. Aborn went to Florida, I think to be, not with her sister, I think it was actually her mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. After some kind of operation, he attacked Mr. Aborn and then has been posing as him to try to steal Laura's fortune from her. And likely, obviously, the bank bonds are from the bank as well. Right? He's probably also involved in that. So Nancy is actually able to get Mr. Aborn free, but unfortunately she doesn't notice as she is doing this, someone comes up behind her. She does get knocked unconscious, and when she wakes up, Stumpy is here tying her up. He's also rechained Mr. Aborn to the cot. It's honestly a pretty bleak situation, and Stumpy Dowd gives a really great villain speech about how he's soon going to get Laura's jewels because now he knows that Laura's at Nancy's house, so he's going to go over there right now while she and Mr. Aborn are trapped down here. And so he leaves, and both Nancy and Mr. Aborn are still trapped. Back at the Drew home, though, Hannah, Laura, and Dawn are starting to get worried because Nancy should have called by now or come home fully. And luckily Carson arrives soon, and he and Dawn and Laura decide to drive up to the area and try to search for her. On the way, Carson explains that he's actually home early because Chief McGinnis called him, and he was actually looking into the backgrounds of the Dowds because I guess Carson was suspicious of them after Nancy had told him that they were actors. Because of course, right? Actors are terrible people, and we just assume that they're probably criminals.
Well, and they're the only people in the world who could possibly have the skills to pull off impersonating someone, right?
Oh my god.
Right?
That's the assumption,
That
I guess.
alone makes you guilty.
So, yeah, but yes, Chief McGinnis looked into their backgrounds and discovered, surprise, surprise, that they do have a criminal history of theft and embezzlement. So the police are currently on the lookout for them in connection with this embezzlement case. So, and then Carson actually shows Laura a picture of the Dowds, I guess that he got from Chief McGinnis or something, and Laura recognizes them as being the people who she knows as Mr. and Mrs. Aborn. Okay. So we give a second layer of confirmation about all this.
So we flash back to the shack now, and luckily Nancy has been able to get her ties off. We have this little self-monologue she gives us about how she remembers, I guess, like Carson's friend giving her tips on how to... Is that the trick?
The trick is to try to like press your fingers together and like keep space in between your palms so that it looks like your hands are flat together, but they're actually not. And so that when you can collapse them
and then slip out. Oh, that's clever. That's a really good trick. They didn't explain how to actually hold your hands in the book. Nancy just remembers that there is a special way to hold your hands so that you can more easily slip out of the ties or whatever.
Well, these days it doesn't matter. People who are going to be kidnapping you and tying you up these days are not going to use rope. So they're going to use zip ties and duct tape.
Yeah.
Which there are still ways to get out of everyone, but just you can't really do that. It doesn't really work.
Yeah. A little more difficult.
Yeah.
But so she is able to get loose, and then she's able to... Stumpy left the key so we can just unlock Mr. Aborn's bonds or whatever, and then they are able to get through the woods back to Nancy's car, but very, very slowly because Mr. Aborn is physically not in a good shape. He's been in this basement for like weeks and is severely undernourished. He hasn't had any water in like 24 hours. He is extremely weak, and so they're kind of limping back to the car here.
He also hasn't been able to move. So like even like when he just like gets up, I guess his muscles may have like been like atrophied or at least really stiff to the point where like he really can't like walk well.
Yeah. He can barely even stand, and so he's having to lean on Nancy. So it takes them a while, but they do actually get back to the car. And when she tries to start it up, it won't, because don't worry, Stumpy took that measure as well. He made sure to sabotage the car before he left this little wooded area. And they actually see the Dowds leaving as they're trying to get in the car, and they hide a little bit behind a tree or whatever. And so they see them drive off, and they're like, okay, perfect time to get back to the main house, Jacob Aborn's real house. So she decides like, okay, let's get you home at the very least. And so when they get there, they realize, oh, it's been completely ransacked and everything has gone out of the safe because obviously they took it with them when they were fleeing. And it is not just Laura's money, but it's also all of Mr. Aborn's like life savings. And so that's a really big hit as well. But then we hear a car outside and we're really worried that it's the Aborns coming back. But then we find out that no, it's just those two siblings that we'd met who are the neighbors of the Aborns. Oh, yeah. So the siblings, they're the Donnells, and then their parents are also with them. Nancy had told them that the Aborns were back in town and that they should be on the lookout for Laura. And then they'd mentioned this to their parents as well, who were suspicious because, again, they are close friends with the Aborns and feel like they would have known about any change in vacation plans like this. So they came over to investigate. They all make arrangements to call Carson and also the police to fix Nancy's car. And Mrs. Donnell is actually a nurse, conveniently, so she's able to attend to Mr. Aborn. And then Carson, Laura, and Dawn show up. So everybody's here now. It's a big old party. And the story is told to everyone about what's going on. And the police are given Nancy's description of the Dowds' car to try to search for them. And then Nancy has an idea. The Dowds had mentioned a Fred, like as she was kind of eavesdropping them while they were trying to get away. They said something about like, oh, and we got to tell Fred this or whatever. Yeah. And so we don't know who this Fred guy is, but she believes that he could be their contact in the bank who is helping them with the embezzling. And she thinks that they are probably hiding out together at that same bungalow that she, Helen, and Laura had all taken shelter in from the storm in the very first part of the book. And we think this because she remembers that very similar car to the ones that the Dowds were in. That's the same car that almost sideswiped us at the very beginning of the story as well. So she, Dawn, and Carson all drive over to that first bungalow or whatever, and the only road leading to it is under construction, so it's a little bit difficult to make it over there, but they do actually make it. And when they get there, they split up and kind of circle the house to see if they can spot anyone doing anything or see if there's anybody inside. So Dawn and Nancy go one way and Carson goes the other, and they don't see anyone. But when Nancy and Dawn get back to the front of the house, they find Carson on the ground, having just been hit over the head. So this confirms that, yeah, the Dowds and this Fred guy were probably here, probably bonked Carson, and then have now gotten away. So they get Carson into the car and then start driving down the road and are able to actually spot the Dowds ahead of them. And we have actually a pretty big car chase here. Pretty long scene where they're driving recklessly, but never over the speed limit.
Right.
And because it is so dark and the roads are a mess and there's all this like construction going on as well, the Dowd's car drives off the side of a cliff.
Honestly, I think this might be one of the worst accidents that we see in like Nancy Drew world. So obviously the Drews and Dawn like quickly spring into action to try to help them. But honestly, they think that like no one could have survived that. They're like worried that they're going to see their dead bodies when they get down to the bottom of this ravine. And so, but they go and they pull 3 unconscious people from the wreck. It's still kind of unclear if they're okay or not, but we do recognize 2 of them as being the Dowds, and then one man we assume must be Fred. Also, we learn from Carson that there is an employee at the bank who he was investigating named William Frednick. So we think Frednick. We think that's probably who this is. Luckily, an ambulance and the police come like really quickly because it turns out a nearby farmer saw this wreck. And so they get there and they're able to actually stabilize and revive all 3 people. So they're alive. So that's good. But the police arrest them, obviously, and send them to the hospital. But Nancy, also the car is like about to explode. I didn't mention that, but the car is like gonna explode. And Nancy manages to save the 2 suitcases from the car like seconds before the explosion goes off. And Dawn and Carson are like, "What were you doing, you crazy person? Like, it's not that important. Leave it." But Nancy was like really determined because she knew that like inside those suitcases must be like the entirety of Laura and Mr. Aborn's fortune. So she's like, no, like their livelihood depends on me getting those suitcases out of that car. And she does it. But they open up the suitcases and inside is just clothes and disguises. There's no money in there. Or is there? Actually, Nancy suggests that the suitcases might have false bottoms, and they check in, and indeed they do. And inside the bottoms of the suitcases are all of the uncashed, or not all, some of the uncashed securities from the bank. I think some of them actually did. They got away with them, as well as all of Mr. Aborn's and Laura's fortune. Woo! Go Nancy!
Good job.
Nancy and Carson head to the hotel to sleep, and Dawn goes back to River Heights. And the next day, the Drews visit the Aborns again. And of course, they're so grateful to Nancy, Laura especially, because not only has Nancy saved her fortune, now Laura is in the care of guardians who seem to really care about her and really want her to be there. So that's nice. The bank president also visits and thanks Carson and Nancy for catching the people responsible for the theft. And we also learn that Mrs. Dowd's brother was involved and he ended up being caught and confessed, but it really doesn't matter. He was just another person at the bank who was working to do this whole con. And the Aborns and Laura arranged to visit the Drew home the next day because they put Laura's mother's jewelry in Carson's safe. And so they go there to get Laura's jewelry out. And when they do, Laura ends up pulling out her jewelry and giving Nancy an aquamarine ring as a token of their friendship, and as a memory of their time on the water.
So special.
When Nancy almost died.
Yeah.
Now you have this ring forever to remember your near-death experience and me.
Yay. Oh my gosh.
So funny. Oh my gosh. Of course, a mystery would not be complete without Nancy getting jewelry as a reward for her.
Of course.
help.
Oh, of course. Yeah. We never got Helen coming back.
I know.
kind of disappointing because we were promised that she would come say hi to us in River Heights when she got home, but whatever.
Well, and also she said that her and her aunt were going to come back and visit Laura at some point.
Right.
And so I thought, well, okay, they'll come back and they'll discover something. Like they'll bring us a clue or we'll run into them somewhere. Or I thought that they might actually save Nancy. I thought they were going to be the car that was coming up that Nancy and Mr. Aborn hear outside. I was like, that would be perfect.
That would have been good. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess it was the neighbors, and that's fine. That helped too. But it just, I don't know. It seemed like they had already checked on them too. Because like we talked about how he had found the note on the door saying to like not accept milk deliveries anymore or whatever. And so I was like, well, okay, so they've already visited, and I seemed like they learned what they needed to know. So I thought for sure, okay, we'll just have one more wrap up, one more kind of like God moment, except not, because we literally talked about this before. Helen and her aunt come and they rescue them, but whatever.
They made such a big deal out of the aunt being there for the wedding dress thing that I thought at the end we'd at least get to like see Helen try it on or something like that.
Or see sketches or something.
Right. Nope.
Yeah. Or see the fabric, or especially because we also talked about Dawn's sister's weddings. Maybe wedding should have been one of our 3 words.
Oh, yeah.
Because if I had a nickel for every time that we mentioned a wedding in a Nancy Drew book, or this Nancy Drew book, wouldn't be a lot, but I'd have 2 nickels, which is weird. And it's weird that it happened twice.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah. But no more Helen. Kind of a shame. But yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Overall, I think it was a great time.
Yeah, it was really fun.
It's totally vibes. Like nothing super interesting, I feel like, honestly. But I was interested when I was reading it. But like none of it is very like stand out, exciting, except I would say for the exploding car. That was probably our climax of the book, is when Nancy saves the suitcases from the exploding car. But like other than that, I don't know. Laura could be anyone. I don't feel super connected to Laura.
No.
But I just really enjoyed hearing Nancy have like a summer adventure. It's so weird.
Fun. Yeah.
It's really fun, but it's so weird to me that like I feel like I can't tell you why I like this book.
Yeah.
But I do like it.
It really does feel like something that could really happen, where a lot of these other mysteries, it hinges on so many things falling into place correctly and just being so they're just like, that would never actually happen, you know?
That's true. I think, it's definitely partially the fact that it was like realistic, but it was also like relatable.
Yeah.
Like, I think I could see myself as being Nancy in this book. Like, Nancy didn't seem like a superhero necessarily in this book. And I felt like all of her actions were clearly motivated. There wasn't any like situation where Nancy kind of fell into anything. It was like everything that happened because Nancy decided to do something, and everything she decided to do made sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
I will say, I do want to read just a little bit of the beginning just to give you guys a sense of like the atmosphere of this book and like the storm in particular. So a few minutes later, angry waves began to beat against the sides of the boat. Are there life preservers aboard, Helen? Nancy asked. No, Helen answered fearfully. Nancy set her chin grimly. Although it was only 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky was becoming increasingly dark. The pleasant summer breeze, which had been blowing earlier, was turning into a stiff wind. A streak of forked lightning cut across the sky, momentarily disclosing a thick mass of ugly clouds. The lightning was followed by an ominous crack of thunder, which caused the girls to jump. A moment later, the wind began to howl. It struck the boat with a force which made Helen grasp the railing next to her for support. Another dazzling flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and simultaneously a deluge of rain began to descend. Like, the whole book is like that. Especially, of course, all of the storms. But, like, just the whole thing. I don't know. It's just good.
Yeah.
It's just good.
We need to get you a copy of the original, because Mildred's writing is just so much better.
I'm sure. Yeah. Anyway. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, a lot of this story banked on us kind of just knowing that a person is cleared of criminal activity because they are too stupid or too nice to have done anything, or are friends with someone
and therefore
therefore not, which we just recorded our scoop sesh about tropes, which I think has come out before this probably. And that is one of our least favorite tropes. Everyone.
Yeah, that's probably definitely the most unrealistic part of it is Nancy just automatically knowing someone's character from looking at them.
Yeah. But otherwise, I don't think I really had that many issues with this book as far as like plot wise. You know, I think that that's the only unrealistic thing, really.
Yeah.
I will say too, I think that this book had a lot of just like really heartfelt moments. Like, there's a point where Nancy has just come home to take care of Anna. It's the morning after Carson breaks in.
Oh, yes.
And like Hannah's making breakfast and Nancy wakes up in her bedroom and she talks about how she hears like Carson's razor like buzzing in like the next room, and she smells the breakfast that Hannah's making downstairs. And she's just so happy to have like everyone home and to be home with the people that she loves. And it is so freaking sweet.
Yeah.
Like just so lovely. Like, and that's just so nice to read. I feel like we don't get that a lot of the times in Nancy Drew books. Like, we don't get how Nancy really feels about people, and how much she really does love Carson and Hannah. And I think that this is just it's just a book full of really great moments like that.
It is really heartfelt. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Nancy Carson dynamic. I'll never get over it. Nothing tops it, truly. He's such a good dad in this one. Always he is. But he's very supportive of her, even when she does want to drive 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, you know, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, gosh, I can't imagine. Like, I try to think about, like, obviously I'm not a parent, but like I do have people I care about very closely, obviously. And I'm trying to imagine, like, if my husband told me that he was going to go investigate a criminal's house in the middle of the night, I would be like, no, you're not. Yeah. I'd be like, what are you talking about? No.
Guess again.
But Carson just like, be careful. I can't imagine the pain he must feel.
He trusts her so much.
He trusts her. He really does trust her.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't really have anything bad to say about this book. I don't have any criticism. I didn't run into, I mean, there wasn't really racism. There was obviously assumptions and prejudices that we were making about people, like the Aborns specific, or the Dowds, I should say. But that's the main example.
Yeah. It's really more class things, honestly.
Yeah. But there weren't too many moments of sexism, honestly. We got a healthy amount of, like, I feel like female character representation in this book, even without Bess and George. We get Laura's a great character. Yeah. She's, like, brave and resilient, and she comes to help Helen and Nancy out in the water, and she... I don't know, she's brave. She runs away. Like, she's upset. Yeah, because she's in a bad situation. But, like, I don't know. She's great. She's nice, very kind. Yeah, I don't know. Everybody was cool except for the bad guys.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a solid story.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
What else do we want to say about it?
Oh, okay. It's like, are we done?
Oh, no. We still got the game and the original text to talk about.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I totally forgot. Yes. Yeah, no, tell us about the original text, Kori.
Okay, yes, the original text. But yeah, so basically we open the exact same way, except it's way more drawn out. The boating disaster that takes about half of the first chapter in the revised text, it's about the first 4 chapters.
Whoa.
And so when we say it's more atmospheric, I mean, like, it's really... Oh, wow. In the original, we show you that Nancy has, like, been struggling, and you, like, feel exhausted with her as she's trying to, like, keep Helen above water. We're struggling in the water for, like, 3 chapters, and Helen cannot swim at all. And so it's not that, like, Helen hurt her arm. Helen is, like, actively trying to bring Nancy down with her. Because, you know, when you're drowning, you don't intentionally do it. But if you can't swim, you will start to flail and panic a little bit. And in doing so, she, like, almost pushes Nancy like under the water because she's trying to use Nancy to, like, push off of to get herself, get her head above water. So it's very scary, and she almost drowns or whatever. But then the same thing happens where Laura comes and rescues them, and that's all great. we can barely even get into Laura's boat without also capsizing that, so it's a little bit more treacherous. But then we do make it to what is in the original, it's the bungalow, but it's just a little shack boathouse thing.
Okay.
They explain for a couple minutes that, yeah, Laura's mom has recently passed away, and she's nervous because the Aborn, or sorry, it's not the Aborns, it's just Jacob Aborn. He's not married in this one, so it's just the one guy.
Oh, I would be nervous too.
Yeah.
Going to some random guy's house at, what, she's 16, 17?
Yeah, about. And this is not even a relative of theirs. It's an old school friend of Mom's. So she's never met this man, and they're not related in any way.
Yeah, I don't think they're related in revised text either. I think they're family friends.
They said that they were distantly related.
Oh.
So at least they're still relatives, but like not in the original.
I could have sworn.
And actually how Aborn is the one who told us about, or told Nancy about Laura's funds being depleted or whatever. Laura's the one that tells us all of the money stuff. So she tells us that she's been left this inheritance of like $50,000. She's got plenty of money to her name, but she is just really nervous about Mr. Aborn coming to pick her up because the letter that she got from him was not at all cordial. And so she's just really nervous about it. And of course, Nancy and Helen are staying at the camp, and Laura has her hotel on the other side of Moon Lake. And so they invite her. They're like, hey, how about tomorrow you come to the camp and we can go do camp activities all day. So that's what happens. And Laura visits camp and, oh, sorry, what's wrong?
No, I just looked up how much $50,000 is.
It's like $1 million something.
It's like just under $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money for back then. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, Laura visits the camp the next day, but she's not the brave person from the revised text that we have in the original. She's extremely timid, extremely meek, characterized as being physically very weak as well. She's just a very small, thin little thing that Nancy describes she could like blow away in the wind. Yeah.
A waif.
But is just nervous all the time. And she's obviously very upset about losing her mom. And so she's just clearly not enjoying any of the camp activities. She participates, but she just clearly looks miserable. And so Nancy is like, okay, why don't we just go back to our cabin and just you, me, and Helen will hang out. And so they do hang out for a little bit. And then she ends up asking Nancy, she's like, I'm really nervous about meeting Mr. Aborn tomorrow. Would you mind like y'all being there when I meet him? Could you come to the hotel tomorrow? And they're like, yeah, of course we could do that for you. So the next day they all go to the hotel to meet Laura first and then wait for Mr. Aborn to arrive, but he is already there. And when they meet him, he is fine, but he's just a little like boisterous or whatever. So he's obnoxious. But it seems like Laura really wants to tell Nancy something. Like she's like trying to communicate something to Nancy with her eyes, but she just can't say it because Mr. Aborn's there. And she even is like, hey, Nancy and Helen, why don't we go get some tea so that we can get away from Mr. Aborn for 5 minutes and I can tell you this thing. But he will not let them out of his sights. He's like, I would love some tea. Let's all go. And like just will not let her out of his sights. And so Laura never gets to say what this thing is. Right. And then something else happens. We find out that she supposedly only has $15K left. And so that's a little weird that he's like, yeah, your mom was just like really bad with money. And like, you thought you had all this inheritance and like $15K is still a lot. It's just like your mother's illness ate up way more than you thought of it. So it's going to be kind of an issue. But then he's like, all right, you got to get packed. It's time to go to Melrose Lake. And so he just kind of whisks her away, and Nancy and Helen don't hear from her again. And they stay at the camp for like 2 more weeks and they just kind of forget about her. And Helen's like, Nancy, he is her legal guardian. And so even if something was going on, it would take like a court order to get anything changed. So really, there's not much you can do here. Right. And so Nancy's like, yeah, Helen, you're kind of right. And so they just enjoy camp for 2 weeks. And they just kind of go about their lives. They don't hear from her again. And then it is time for Nancy to go home now. Hannah's fine. There's no ankle injury in this one. It's just time for her to leave camp now. And so she goes home. Same thing happens where we're on that road and then the tree falls. And then she sees somebody coming up on foot and it's Laura. It's not the Donnells. It's Laura. And she says, I ran away with nothing but my mother's jewelry. Oh, yeah. So sorry. This is when Aborn told her that she was actually broke entirely. He was like, yeah, that 15K we thought you had, it's actually 0K. And you need to hand over those jewels right now so that we can like pay for your living expenses or whatever. And so that's when she was like, yeah, I'm going to run away now because this is not good. And so Nancy is just like, why don't you come with me? And so they take her back to River Heights and she ends up staying at the Drew home. And Carson is still away on his trip at this point. We haven't really seen or heard from Carson. The bank embezzling thing does not happen. That's completely made up for the revised text. So Carson's not home, but Hannah is just going to like watch over Laura while she's there. And Nancy gets an idea. She's like, I would really love to question Mr. Aborn, but I have no like pretense for going over there. So why don't you write him a letter? And then that can be like my cover story of like why I'm there is just to deliver this letter. And then I can stay and ask him more questions. Right. So she gets Laura to write the letter, and then kind of the same thing happens where she's driving to go deliver it to him and then sees him just like walking through the forest with his package. And so she follows him to the clearing, and then he catches her looking in the window. Same thing happens there. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the first bungalow. Now, this is the shack in the woods where Mr. Aborn, the real Mr. Aborn, had been chained up, but it is a bungalow in this story. So we're at this old bungalow, and she's like, who owns this bungalow? And he's like, that's none of your business. Get out of here. So whatever. So he tells her to leave. And then this is when she gets her hotel room and starts to formulate her plan to come back and investigate everything that night. So she goes to the house that night and sees him take the money from the safe. All that's pretty much the same, where we hide in the closet and then he gets the money out of the safe or whatever. And then he actually goes to bed that night. So she just ends up sneaking out of the house and goes to look at the first bungalow. Because the house he's living in, the real Mr. Aborn's house, is also a bungalow. So that's second bungalow.
So is she's staying there?
She's just snuck in. She's staying at the hotel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's got her hotel room, but she's snuck in. And it's like 3:00 in the morning at this point because we've just been investigating for so long. So yeah, so she sneaks back to the first bungalow, the old shack or whatever. And this is when we find the real Jacob Aborn there. Pretty similar, but Stumpy does overhear her saying that Laura's safe in River Heights. So he comes down and he's like, thanks so much for that. I'm going to tie you up and now I'm going to head to River Heights to go get Laura. But they are able to escape. He didn't sabotage Nancy's car, though. So they're able to just get in Nancy's car. So she drives the real Jacob Aborn home, and she's going to call a doctor for him, but he doesn't have a phone because it's 1930. So she actually goes back to the hotel that she was staying at, calls the police there, and calls a doctor for him. And then she tries to call home to warn Carson's not even home yet, to warn Hannah and Laura, but there's no answer at home. And so we start to get really worried. We're like, oh gosh, he's already there. He's already hurt Laura. And so she decides the only bet that I have right now is just to try to catch up to him. And so she starts driving only to see another car driving the other direction. And who is it? It's Carson. Yay! Okay, so Carson has come into town, got the story from Laura and Hannah, and then he was like, all right, let's go. And that's why no one answered, is because I guess Hannah was asleep. Hannah's not here, but Carson and Laura are here in Carson's car.
Okay.
So Carson puts Laura in Nancy's car, and he's like, all right, Nancy, if they're shooting, you hang back with Laura so that it's just me and Stumpy getting shot. I don't want either of y'all getting shot. So they realize that most likely Stumpy is headed for state lines. And so they start heading for the state line as well. And then Carson and Stumpy have a shootout. Carson starts blasting. Yes, of course. And this is when Stumpy drives off the cliff. Same thing happens where Nancy scrambles to get the suitcase out before the car explodes. Carson gets Stumpy out of the wreck, and then they take him to the hospital. Drop him at the hospital, whatever. He's going to live. He's fine. And then the cops there congratulate Nancy on her catching of Stumpy, because turns out he's like a serial imposter thief guy, and he's been doing this a while. And so they've been looking for him. And then they take Laura home back to meet the real Mr. Aborn, and she's all happy because she gets her real guardian back now. And then they open the suitcases and learn that, yes, Laura's money is indeed fine. And it's so wonderful because now Jacob can afford to send Laura to school, and that's our happy ending.
Oh,
so
okay,
yeah,
great.
So,
Wow.
way, way, way fewer things happen in the original text, obviously, but drawn out in such a way that it feels just as desperate as the first one, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And the state line thing obviously reminds me of the game.
Yeah. Secret of the Old Clock.
Because if you guys weren't aware, that game is, of course, based off of the first 4 books mashed together. And after reading this, I'm really impressed with how well they were able to work that storyline into the game with the other storylines already being there and having other things going on as much as they were, you know?
Yeah. Well, because also her mother's jewelry.
Getting stolen.
That's a thing. And then I think even Mr. Topham's house is kind of bungalow shaped.
It is, definitely.
It looks like a bungalow.
Well, and not to spoil anything for the game for anyone. So if you haven't played the game, maybe just kind of skip ahead at this part because I'm about to say something that really spoils the ending for you here. But at the end, we find out that the culprit's real name is Marion Aborn.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
The Emily Crandall character is a little bit of a mashup of Emily Crandall from Lilac in the book, but also Laura Pendleton, and also maybe a little bit the Hoover sisters from Secret of the Old Clock, just because Josiah Crowley was supposed to leave her his money or whatever. So yeah, a little bit of a mashup of all of our friends that Nancy makes along the way. She just kind of gets smushed all into this one Emily Crandall character.
Well, yeah, and like her guardian, like the whole fact that like her mother died and then she has to get a guardian, and it's like an old family friend who turns out to be an imposter. Yeah.
Also doesn't remember mom's middle name. Supposed to have been a seamstress her whole life, but doesn't remember how to do even a single stitch. Like, they lay the groundwork really well. And then it's a nice little reveal at the end when we do go to the state line and have the car chase to cut her off. And then we find out she's really Marion Aborn. Yeah. It's a nice little touch. I was really impressed with how much they crammed in there, with how few things actually happen in the story, but they still made it relate back to Old Clock and Lilac Inn and a little bit Hidden Staircase.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's fun. I don't know.
It's fun.
It almost makes me like the game a little bit more, even though the game is definitely not one of my favorites.
Right.
It's fine. It's not bad, but it's not one that I love.
Just a bit of a fever dream.
Yeah. Well, and that happens when you try to push so many plot elements into one.
Yeah. But interesting. It's definitely interesting to think about that in context of the fact that it was based on the Bungalow Mystery, because I mean, like, I knew that, but obviously I didn't remember anything about the Bungalow Mystery or know anything about the Bungalow Mystery, and so I didn't know to the extent to which it was, and it totally is.
We need to read Lilac Inn now so that we can get the full picture of the game, because that's now the only one of those 4 that we haven't covered. So
I know. Well, we'll have to do it later.
Yeah. It's not the next episode. Sorry, guys.
No, sorry. sorry. We'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
But yeah, anyway, anything else we want to say about the game? I didn't even think about Topham's house looking like a bungalow, because it totally is.
Well, I always thought it was weird because it was like, you know, I think about the houses in particular more in relation to Hidden Staircase, obviously, right? Because Hidden Staircase, the plot is that, spoiler alert, there is like a tunnel underneath that leads from one house to the other, and that the houses were built by like the same guy or whatever. But I always thought in Secret of the Old Clock, the inn and the house that where Topham's saying Josiah Crowley's old house, looked so different from each other, and I always thought it would be, it's weird that, again, spoiler alert, they connect. But it makes so much more sense if you think like, oh, they're trying to make it look like a bungalow, maybe. For Bungalow Mystery.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
It kind of even looks like the bungalow on the cover of the nappy cover.
It definitely does. Yeah. Same nice big porch in the front.
Yeah.
Very symmetrical looking house. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of anything I'm missing that's like hidden in there, like a hidden detail, you know?
I'm sure if we replayed it, we'd find a ton.
Well, there's so many little Easter eggs in like all of the locations where Nancy can drive to.
Of course. Yeah. I think Pinecrest Hotel is one of them, isn't it?
I don't know. Because it's motel. Pinecrest Motel. I know that they do that in the feel like that. Oh gosh, I don't remember what episode it is, but that's in the CW show. Yeah,
It is. Yeah,
they
yeah.
have that. And then I feel like there's also like other shows where we have a Pinecrest Motel, and it's
Probably.
like a callback to
Yeah.
like Riverdale, maybe. I don't know. There's always a spooky
Yeah.
motel in a lot of mystery shows, though, so I could just be making that up. But yeah, I don't know.
I did remember two things that I wanted to mention about the original text.
Okay.
The first is, you know how at the end of every mystery story we have like it won't be too much longer till Nancy has another mystery, because next is Mystery of the Lilac Inn, right? And they tell you the title of the next story. That doesn't happen in the original. It just kind of ends, which makes me curious about the fact that it was, published as a set. Maybe they were going to wait and see, like maybe Lilac Inn hadn't been fully fleshed out yet. Maybe they hadn't kind of gotten that established so far.
That would make sense. That would make a lot of sense.
But then the other thing that I really thought was interesting was when Laura mentions that she's just lost her mom, Nancy does not pull out she does not go straight to, well, my mom's dead as well. Not mentioned. Not even hinted at. It's so crazy. We do say that Kate has passed away already, like when we are describing Nancy, but we don't have Nancy being like well, I understand because of my, so.
Yeah, you're right.
I was like, wow, that did happen in the revised, but just not in the original. So I was like, that's obviously that had not been established as a trope yet, because
that's so funny.
We're still so early in the story. But yeah.
Wow. Fascinating Nancy Drew lore, I have to say. I think if I were to describe this in some small words that aren't 3 words, I would say fascinating Nancy Drew lore. That's what the Bungalow Mystery is. Yeah.
I'm interested about this file with Dawn in it.
I really want to read it. I want to see if I have it. What did I say? It was 27?
27.
I don't have that one.
I have it.
Ooh.
Is that him?
Must be. Or could be Ned, of course. Oh my gosh.
With the Barbie doll with a knife through her chest behind them.
Yeah. Wait, read the back of it.
Nancy's high school reunion party turns up an old flame and ignites a burning feud.
Yeah.
Wendy Harriman, the most popular cheerleader in Nancy's class, invites her old schoolmates to a beach party. But the reunion stirs up much more than memories. Someone deliberately sets a flash fire at the barbecue pit, then Wendy's room is ransacked and robbed. When Nancy investigates, she discovers Wendy isn't as popular as she seems. A few fellow students still carry grudges against the snobbish teen queen. Nancy also finds that her former boyfriend, Don Cameron, is still carrying a torch for her, which makes Ned see red. But romance takes a back seat to the mysterious crimes that follow the party guests. Now Nancy has to find out which of her friends is their worst enemy ever.
That's so funny. That sounds like a good one. We're not reading that next, Regular Drews. I just really wanted to know what it said on the back.
No, I just really appreciate that the files did their homework so well.
I know. Yeah. Fascinating Nancy Drew lore, man.
There you go.
Love it. Flashlight score?
It might be a 5.
Really?
It might. I don't know. I'm going to give a 4.5 for both, honestly. Yeah.
Let's see. I think I'd give it a 5 too.
Yeah.
I think it's really good.
It's a classic Nancy Drew mystery.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 5. I keep trying to think, like, is there like anything that I can think of to make it less? And I mean, like, yeah, of course there's like some of our tropes we don't love, but like honestly, no. Like
it's solid.
It's all really good. It's all really good. Yeah, 5 flashlights. I loved it. Yeah.
So good. So good.
I know.
What a good way to end our little mystery story block.
I know.
Well, we're not quite done with this block yet, but of the books we're reading, it's a nice one to finish on.
We have a special episode coming up. Next time, we will be covering another Nancy Drew movie, a Benita Granville movie, Nancy Drew Troubleshooter. It's been a minute since we've covered a Benita Granville movie.
Yeah, and almost like 2 years, it feels like, right? Because the Hidden Staircase would have been the last time.
I think so. I was looking at our episode list the other day trying to figure out which all ones we had covered.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's like Hidden Staircase and then Nancy Drew Reporter, I think, are the only ones we've covered.
Detective was the first one. And that
Detective.
was like...
See, okay. This happened the last time too, is where I got Reporter and Detective confused.
Oh, yes.
And I started to watch Reporter until I realized it wasn't the right one. So, yeah, I do this all the time.
I feel like a lot of people get them confused, especially because most streaming services only show the second one, which in your mind you think, okay, that's the first one.
You're right.
No.
But
yeah,
it's
so
not.
it's Detective, Reporter, Troubleshooter, Hidden Staircase, I think. Yeah.
Yes. So this is the third one, Troubleshooter. And that will be coming up next, Regular Drews.
I'm very excited.
I'm excited too. Felt appropriate after wrapping up this revised text versus original text to get back to another representation of a very original text, Nancy. So excited to take a look at that again. And I guess we will see you then, Regular Drews.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
You can also visit our website, regularnancydrew.com, and also follow us on Instagram at regularnancydrew.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there, thanks for listening.